Welcome back to a Celtic State of Mind. I'm Paul John Dykes, and this afternoon I'm delighted to be joined by Patrick McGilp and John Hughes. We're going to be talking all things Celtic, what's been happening in the last 24 hours, but we're looking ahead to Aberdeen as well, and we're looking back to the pre-season. There's been so much discussion. John Hughes, don't call it a rebuild, or should we?
At the moment, it looks like it could be a significant rebuild. This is one of the things we projected might happen, So as it stands right now, if you're looking at us competing in Europe and the number of people that we potentially have to bed into the team, we have a little over 3 weeks to try and maybe find 4, possibly 5 starters. And that's a rebuild. By anyone's standards, that's a rebuild. And we saw at the weekend how difficult some people find it to integrate some new signings into their squads and their teams. So it's not an easy thing to do. And just with a couple of new people, actually, we had some issues just getting things right at the weekend. So, there's a big job on. And we said this a few weeks ago, actually, right at the start of the transfer window, we were saying it's a massive amount to be done here, like an almost overwhelming amount to be done, logistically speaking, in terms of the number of bodies that we have to get shot of and the quality that we want to bring in. And that quality is not easy found or easy persuaded. Timing is everything in football. You've got to find people that want to move at the right place. There are so many moving parts to this. And we've got so many bodies in that squad, that big, massive, I think, as you described it, bloated squad. And we've got so much to do and not a lot of time to do it. And I would have thought the first part of that, moving people on, we would have seen a lot more then. But I suppose, how can you move people on if you don't know who your first team is? So if you don't know what you've got in, and you've got things thrown into the spanners in the works like Starfelt, Jota, stuff that you didn't think was going to happen, Though to be fair to Starfelt, I would have moved countries for Jacinta as well.
The thing with that, John, right? There's a few interesting points there. You've mentioned Starfelt being unexpected. I think there's maybe an argument to say that the 3 first teamers, Moy, Jota, and Starfelt, for completely different reasons, probably were unexpected. I mean, I think we all expected eventually for Jota to leave the building, but probably not this pre-season. After one season as a permanent player at Celtic, Starfelt, I said the other day we probably should have seen the signs a wee bit earlier when Jacinta moved on, but we just think football all the time, don't we, John? We don't think these guys are human beings. And then the other one, Moy, I knew he was struggling, but I didn't expect the retirement. I thought that was a wee bit of a jag in the arm. I didn't expect that at all. So the 3 starters that have left or are leaving the building in Starfelt's case, I'll ask you, Patrick, were they unexpected? Should we have been better prepared for that kind of movement?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose you've got to expect in modern football, loads of players move on every summer, loads of players come in, loads of players go out. As you say, Jota, he's one of those players where we're probably expecting big money from at some point. We're probably hoping it'd be next summer, but then again, we're probably hoping Ange would be the manager this season. We're hoping to maybe get 2 full years out of him as a permanent player. That never happened. But, we got 25 million from 6 weeks ago now, so we should be in a decent position to replace him. We brought Yang in, obviously. Looks good. Whether he can recreate the 15 goals and 12 assists or whatever it was Jota provided last season, whether he can score 4 Derby goals and 2 Champions League goals, that's what you're replacing. You're replacing not only a consistent player, but a big game player who gets bums off seats and entertains. Starfelt, I suppose there's been links in the past, the fact he's 28 going on 29, you say to yourself, well, either he's going to commit his future to us or we're going to make some money here. So you've got to have that conversation, I suppose. And I think we're barely making our money back by selling him to Celta Vigo. So bit of a strange one. And then, Moy, he might have been 32, but it's hard to account for these things. I think it was an injury with his back and he's just decided to sort of chuck it. So they're all relatively unexpected, but in a weird way, you've got to expect the unexpected in football. And, you know, I don't think we've replaced Shota yet. You know, you could make an argument that we've replaced Moy in the midfield. You know, Turnbull coming back to life. We've signed Kwon. You know, we've got Tilly Yang. We've got a lot of players coming in. It looks as if we're going to be replacing Starfelt like for like with this Lagerbielke, the 23-year-old from Elfsborg. So hopefully he can fill some shoes. And, you know, Naroki looked quite good at the weekend as well. But, you know, as John said, we've got quite a few holes to fill in the squad, because you're looking at last season's Champions League and saying, that wasn't good enough, we want to do better. And at this stage, I don't think we are better than last season. I think we're a wee bit behind, actually. So we've got quite a lot of ground to make up in the next 4 weeks.
You know, when you're right, because when you think of recruitment, generally speaking, you think obviously incomings, but you don't think of the amount of bodies we need to get rid of. Is there a separate department for that, John? Outgoings department.
Yeah, like there should be, another customer service area. But I mean, if you look at, when the new guy comes in, for instance, if we sign Lagerbielke or you take Starfelt into account, we've got 7 bodies at centre half. And they are just that. They are, they're not quality that we want, but they are bodies. And we have a similar situation in midfield where we just have a load of people knocking about. I mean, we still haven't got rid of Sorrow, as far as I'm aware, or did we?
I know. Not yet.
Because I'm not keeping up on it. But Ajeti's the same. We'd probably still have Barkas if we hadn't ripped up his contract. It's an awful lot to do in a few weeks. I don't think we're going to get there at this point. So, my main concern is now to try and fill the most critical gaps, to try and fill the areas which are absolutely, I think, essential. The first of those being goalkeeper. So I think it's absolutely critical. Someone said to me the other day, because I think a journalist had said we're not going to sign another keeper unless one of these 3 move on. And I was like, no, one of the 3 of them will be moved on. That's the way it works. It's not up to them. One of the 3 of them will be moved on. We sign and fingers, toes, and everything else crossed that we sign a very high quality keeper. I would expect that the keeper might be our biggest signing. Looking at what we need in this squad, and the one good thing that we saw from the weekend is that Brendan is clearly seeing the same thing that we are. If you look at who he picked, the changes he made, who's been dropped, it's not just one of these things you're sitting there going, what is going on? How's he making that decision? Can he not see your man, and how he's playing? So he's picked on for him, apart from Hart. But I mean, that's it doesn't matter which way you cut that. It's equally worrying. Even if Bain is playing better than Hart. I mean, Bain in Europe, come on, I mean, that can't be the standard. And it's no harm to the guy. I'm sure he's a decent keeper, at a certain level, but, not at the level we want to be at. And, at this stage, I would be looking for at least a £10 million keeper. I think that's where we need to go big, because that's going to, that makes or breaks you potentially. Now, we've got Kyogo playing beautifully at the other end, and we've got some issues elsewhere in the defence, but, it doesn't create confidence in your defence. A lot of Joe Hart's faults from last year are now really being exacerbated. I mean, the man loves a line more than Robbie Fowler at this point, so he just will not move. Do you know what I mean? He'd probably have to be huckled by bouncers or something to get him off his line. I don't know, but, he will not move. And in fact, the occasions he does move are so rare. It's like, you've seen the lesser spotted duck-billed platypus in your back garden. You know what I mean? You remember when it happens because it's so, look, he's off his line. Look, take a note.
It was incredible, John. It was incredible. Not only that 90s throwback to the classic goal celebration that I certainly remember well, it was a proper get it up you from Robbie Fowler, wasn't it? But you're right. None more so than that example at the weekend where I've said, listen, Nawrocki should have done better with the ball. He should have, won the header. However, it's his first game. So that there are reasons rather around that. Joe Hart, 2 years as the number one, command your area, get off that line. And sometimes goalkeepers love just to punch it. And Joe Hart, would tend to punch that situation out of the danger area, John. He didn't even do that, did he? And then what you've got is Kyogo standing on the line, which isn't really going to help matters because of his height. And obviously the big man should have won the header. But yeah, for me, it's Joe Hart all day long. He's got to command it. And you're talking about Europe. I think it's really interesting. This conversation will expand. I think we started talking about it, Jerry and I, on Monday, about how when Ange is in the building, Patrick, he can do no wrong. If Ange makes a decision, trust in Ange, right? We never stop, all this kind of stuff. And obviously, we got the results. We got the success, and we're not going to repaint or revise history, right? But it is very, very interesting whereby if you'd asked me at the end of last season if I was looking forward to this campaign, I was looking forward to seeing Ange's team going into Europe for a third time. We had our Champions League campaign last season. Some of the guys, hadn't had that experience before, so they got the 6 games under the belt. I don't think Greg Taylor had played Champions League football, had he, before last season? So there was a lot of players just gathering that experience and then going into the campaign again this term, looking forward to it. But now I'm sitting there thinking, what would that look like? If we had gone gung-ho, and because Ange has got no intentions of ever changing his approach. And what we've got in Brendan, I think this time round is somebody completely different who is going to change the approach, who, like John says, is going to focus a wee bit more on that defensive element. And it wouldn't surprise me either if our biggest signing this pre-season was a goalie. And I think that speaks volumes as well. But isn't it interesting, Patrick, that Ange was the golden child and now we're starting to pick away at some of the things. You could probably, you could focus on what Matt O'Reilly said a couple of times, but you could also probably focus on second campaign signings. We're talking about guys like Kobayashi, Haksabanovic, Siegrist, Bernabe, and we're asking ourselves the question, were any of them any good enough?
I mean, we can all talk about how good Ange's signings were, but really, it is from the first season. A lot of the absolute belters that he brought in. I mean, I quite like O. I think he'll become a great player. I think, there's still a chance for Bernabe. Other guys, I think Haksabanovic has definitely got something. He just can't seem to, I don't know whether it's application, whether it's, a lack of speed. It just doesn't seem to click for him. Siegrist, I thought at the time, was a good signing. I don't know what he's like in training. He's obviously absolutely useless because he can't get a game for love nor money. But he's obviously not the answer at all. But when you talk about Ange's amazing, wonderful signings, it is largely the first season because we did have to rebuild the entire club practically in that first season. Apart from Taylor and McGregor, it's a whole new 11. I thought that's why I was quite excited about Siegrist, actually. I thought we could have done with a goalkeeper last summer. Obviously, we stuck with Hart. You've got a few big game mistakes last season, but this pre-season, it's glaringly obvious. I mean, the game against Yokohama, the game against Wolves, the chest at the weekend against Ross County, God knows what he was trying to do there. As you're talking about the corner, every single game there's one, if not 2 or 3 mistakes from allegedly our number one goalkeeper. As John highlights, Scott Bain isn't the answer, and clearly Siegrist isn't the answer either because neither Ange nor Brendan fancy him. So I think it's been our number one weakness for a long time, goalkeeper. I think it should be our priority this window. I hope that's why it's taking so long, because we are trying to get the absolute number one correct answer. It's interesting that Livakovic hasn't moved anywhere because that was first linked 3 or 4 weeks ago, and he's not went to a Turkish team. He's not came to us. He's still at his original club. So I wonder if, I don't know, maybe he's failed a medical or something. Maybe he's got something. He obviously could have moved in the January after the World Cup and didn't. He's had all summer and still hasn't moved. So maybe it's the club holding things up. Maybe he's got some sort of medical issue. I don't know, but that's one I'd like to see over the line if there isn't any sort of hidden problems there. But going back to the Champions League, you look at areas where we could strengthen, and could we get a better left back? I know it might be a bit of a challenge, but I think we could. We're changing the defence a lot this window with Johnston injured, Carter Vickers injured, Starfelt leaving. You look at the midfield, I think John said we have 7 centre halves. I think we have about 9 centre midfielders as well. You've got guys like McCarthy, Sorrow, guys like Kwon who have just come in, Hatate, Turnbull, O'Reilly, Home. I mean, there's loads of guys you think they're for the future, they're for right now, they're for the bin. But you struggle to get. I mean, James McCarthy is probably on something like 15 grand a week, 4-year deal. He's only halfway through it. No one else is going to pay him 15 grand, and
No
he's
chance.
not going to play for anyone other than Celtic. So you actually struggle to get rid of a guy like that. I think Sorrow should be a lot easier to move on. Shouldn't be in too high a wage. Obviously quite keen to play football with 23, 24, I think. So we do have a lot of work, a lot of surgery needed. Obviously, we're still able to function. We're still able to beat teams like Ross County and Kilmarnock, for example. But maybe going into Europe, we probably need better quality.
We need what you're saying there, Patrick. Can we get a better? We have to get a better left back. We have to get better. Even if you look at the game at the weekend, any sort of diagonal or angled ball, people are targeting Taylor. They know he can't get that ball, and they're playing it quite deliberately. And it's not just in Europe where they were doing it last year; they're doing it domestically as well. You know, I mean, he was at fault for the last goal. He was at fault elsewhere as well. A good few mistakes, and he cannot defend that ball, and it's because he's just not tall enough. Do you know what I mean? If we're signing a new guy, we don't want to be signing him from Hobbiton. You know what I mean? You just want to be get a guy that's got a decent stature, decent size, and can actually defend. And that's why when we see these new central defenders coming in, I'm actually looking to see their height, and I was disappointed to see it was downgraded. The Swedish boy, I think, went from 6'3" to about 6'1" over the weekend, but his initial stats said 193 centimeters. So, but we need stature in those areas, as was perfectly demonstrated with the fact we conceded from an absolutely bog standard nothing corner.
Yep,
nothing corner.
And that ball, John, I think Taylor's got a habit of getting caught on the wrong side at times as well when it comes to that kind of basic defending element. There's a great site out there called The Coach's Voice, and they've done quite a lot of deep dives into the tactical shape of Brendan Rodgers' side from Celtic first time right up to now. And it's interesting. In fact, they go further back. They go right back to Liverpool. And it's interesting how he has utilised and deployed these fullbacks. And I'm looking at Taylor to try and be as fair as possible on him, because I think he's done really well under Ange Postecoglou for 2 seasons. I just don't think he's going to be suited to the way Brendan Rodgers plays. I really don't. No. I think the attributes that Taylor has were really, honed, and we played a style of football that suited him, whereby he was getting the ball in positions of the park where he was comfortable. But that simple ball, which he couldn't deal with, John, at the weekend, resulting in the second goal, for example, for me is a great example of how he's not going to be suited to this team. I want, and I know it's easier said than done, I want the equivalent to Johnston at left back. I just want another, you know what I mean? That type of player on the left-hand side. When it comes to the goalie, I do think it's very interesting that Livakovic hasn't done a deal yet. You're right when it comes to that, Patrick. And it fills you with a wee bit of hope that perhaps Celtic are maybe still in the mix. There's loads of sources reporting on this particular move or the mooted move to Fenerbahce, which hasn't materialised. But when you look at that goalkeeper, 40-odd caps, 45 caps for Croatia, 28 years of age, he's a goalie that you're not signing him to sit on a bench, are you? Joe Hart will definitely be pushed for his jersey, something that he's not had since he came to Celtic 2 years ago. And I'm not saying it's complacency. I just think every player in that team needs to have somebody breathing down their neck for their jersey.
I think, Paul John, at this stage, we've got enough potential in the team. So let's sign some starters. There is enough there. I mean, we're talking about replacing Jota, and we've got Yang and Tilio, but they were both signed to replace Abada. you know what I mean? So,
That's a great point. That's a great point.
Nowhere now. So they weren't for that, and it wasn't that kind of quality we were looking at. So you were thinking potential, bring it through, basically the same thing as Abada. But right now, I mean, I really think we need 3, 4, possibly 5, if you want to be ideal about it, starters. Not guys who are coming in with potential. The Jotas and the CCVs of the world. Because we can be as supportive as we want. You don't want to criticise a team, overly, potentially, won a treble last year, etc. But we didn't do well in Europe. And that's the stated aim of Brendan coming back here. So, as it stands just now, can this team, or will this team compete well in Europe? I don't think they will. I think we've got a lot of work to do. And, there's no point in being blind to that fact. Yes, we have good players. Yes, domestically, especially if we take the advantage of, if across the city they're falling to bits, which is a bit early to say that. But if they start dropping points early doors and keep dropping them, then we potentially don't have that much of a challenge. So we have potential domestic domination as we have had for 11 out the last 13 seasons or whatever, and that's grand. But that's not the target we're setting for ourselves here, or at least I didn't think it was. I thought we were trying to do something in Europe, and we will not do it as it stands.
When you look at the tagline there, John, it is, it's not about us saying, listen, we've won the treble last season, we're spoilt, we want more, right? How can Brendan Rodgers improve on a treble winning campaign? He can. He absolutely can. See, when you start looking at the quality of the squad, you start looking at European aspirations, as you say, which have been the stated ambition, John, then he can definitely improve. Brendan knows that. He wouldn't have taken the job otherwise. He wasn't going to take the job and then just continue as is, the way that everything was kind of moving on anyway. But it goes back to the point we made in relation to Ange. He could do no wrong until he left, and then we start looking at all the things that maybe didn't go so well. The transfer in the second season, the transfers weren't great. Matt O'Reilly's pinpointed a couple of things. We might be picking up Matt's points completely wrong, obviously. Patrick, I want to ask, what do you think, John?
Can I just interrupt that? Because it just happened this morning. I saw something that because you're sort of wondering why Matt O'Reilly has made those points consistently. Why is he so annoyed? Right, so is it just Hatate was teacher's pet, and he felt that Turnbull wasn't getting a fair shake? And just a stat that I saw this morning made me think, oh, maybe it's a lot more than that. Maybe it's he doesn't like playing with him. And Hatate has the worst stats for pressing. He has worse stats than Abada. He doesn't press. So he's not defending. And that means it's O'Reilly and McGregor. So, and especially maybe when O'Reilly was replacing McGregor during that European run, maybe he felt, really, this guy's doing my nutting because he's not pressing. So to me, that makes more sense than Matt just got a bit miffed about selection. It's just that he prefers playing with Turnbull, who's himself not a great presser, but much better than Hatate. Maybe every player has guys that they prefer to play with. We all have, no matter what team sport you're in, you always know there's one guy that's getting picked, you don't know why, and your mate or someone else is much better than him, you prefer to play with them. That's just a fact, and it happens at elite levels as well. And I think it's quite possible that Matt O'Reilly took the hump because he just couldn't see why Hatate was getting picked because he wasn't pressing, and that was leaving O'Reilly exposed. And he felt as if he was getting the blame for stuff that wasn't his fault. Now, that's just entire supposition. That entire section there is me making assumptions. But it makes a lot more sense, as I say, than him just getting a strop on about a selection.
Well, John, it makes perfect sense. I'm going to say there was an example when way back we interviewed Neil Lennon. I don't know if a lot of the people tuning in may not be aware of this, but we interviewed Neil Lennon many years ago. He was the manager of Hibs at the time. And the interview was recorded and it is on the Acsom channel. So you could seek it out on YouTube or on the audio networks as well. It is out there. And he tells a story. I'm wondering if it was edited from the interview now, because there was a wee comment made that might have upset a few people. Anyway, he was telling a story very similar to that, John, about a particular player in that team that he played in under Martin O'Neill. And he named him, and it was Lubo, right? So we all love Lubo, and we all remember everything that he could do. He was a phenomenal footballer, one of the most talented players I've seen with 2 feet ever in a Celtic jersey. And Lennon said he was a bloody nightmare to play with. A nightmare to play with, because, like you say, see all that hard work and all that kind of stuff, John? No chance. And what would happen is he was lauded after the game for pulling something out the bag that nobody else in the park could do. So it was all forgotten about. But Lenny says it was very frustrating for the workers and the guys who were grafting. Obviously, they're shoring up behind the player. So, of course, it happens, John. Absolutely. And at every single level.
Just to tell you a story, and they don't forget it either. Certainly, in my old man's case, I remember one of the first things I said to old man, asked him about Bertie Auld, and said, wouldn't pass me the ball. And I was like, this is like 40, 50 years later. I said, what? Respect to, Bertie's great crack, and isn't he? He's great. Aye. He says, aye, but he wouldn't pass me the ball. So that annoyance, and that probably happened in about 3 games, but he still, he didn't forget it all those years later, and it just shows you, because that's what really struck home with me with Matt O'Reilly complaining, because it just really reminded me of that. Because they just don't forget it. This is their life, and they take it incredibly seriously. So for us, it's an interesting conversation. For them, that's their life, and if someone's not playing the way they want them to play, it drives them mental.
Mm-hmm. No, without a doubt. Yeah. I mean, one of the more kind of like modern examples of this, I remember it being spoken about, was Teddy Sheringham and Andy Cole. They didn't like each other, did they? So they wouldn't pass the ball to each other. It is bizarre. It is bizarre. And then I read a remarkable article in the 442 mag back in the day about someone looking at the kind of psychology of it. And it was like, no matter how, what level you're playing at, how well you're trained, there is a human element in there that if somebody is in space in a better position that you don't like, you'll pass it to somebody else, even though they're in a worse position in the park. Bizarre. I felt it was bizarre. Footballers are not robots. We've got to remember that. Kevin Mullen, you're in. Afternoon, Acsom. I know some people are a bit worried about the squad, but just remember, we are building from a position of strength. Keep the faith. Rodgers will bring in quality players.
Well, just on that point, John Paul, we were building from a position of strength. So if you take Moy, Jota, and potentially Pate, right? If the rumours are to be believed, these guys are, I referred to them last night as the lock pickers, the momentum changers, the game winners, the difference makers, the guys that bring that creativity, the kind of ballers that make the difference in a stagnant game. They make things happen. So to lose all of that, and let's hope we don't lose Tati, but, to lose all of that potentially, that's a massive backward step for us in terms of creativity. So that's difficult to replace. So we were building from a position of strength, but at the moment we have lost more than we have gained.
Mm-hmm. No, you're right. Because, the thing with the signings, Patrick, and I've said this already, the 4 that were obviously lined up prior to Rodgers coming in, that have been completed since Rodgers arrived and will be attributed to him because it happened in his tenure. But when you're signing 2 South Korean boys and you're bringing someone in from Australia, a Citigroup team, and you're looking at the type of signings that we're bringing in and home as well. These guys, they were in the works already, and I don't think they're the starters that we've been talking about. However, during the season, some of them will prove themselves to be starters. That's just natural within the game. Nawrocki, I think, is a different kettle of fish. I think he's made a different stuff, and I think he is far more of a Brendan Rodgers-esque signing. And then like John says, 4 or 5 starters between now and the end of the transfer window is what we need. What happens though is often we can't get them in time. So we might be in a situation there, Patrick. Do you split it between two transfer windows? Is that too risky when you consider the fact you've got the Champions League campaign in between those windows?
Well, I suppose it's a question of why you're bringing them in. I mean, if they're necessary to win the league, you have to bring them in as soon as possible. But at the same time, if they're for the Champions League, there's little to no point in bringing them in January, because it's the Champions League you're trying to make progress in. I think we could see a scenario where you bring guys in on loan. We're talking about upgrading the left back. The Kieran Tierney rumour doesn't go away. It's one of those ones where you think, is this maybe the solution here? And I think it's something that we could experiment with later in the window. I've seen a few guys comment saying that the reason no one signed Livakovic yet is Zagreb aren't letting him go until they either qualify or get knocked out of the Champions League. They play Athens tonight and then again next Tuesday. So everyone get your Athens tops looked out. So that it can be a Celtic player for when we play Killie next Sunday. Otherwise, they go into a playoff against Antwerp, and then regardless of what the result is, we've got about 4 days to sign him. So you really need Athens to knock Zagreb out if we're going to sign him. I think. I mean, if you can't get a player in, you can't get a player in. So I wouldn't sign a lesser player. I mean, if he's not good enough, there's no point wasting the money. You've seen that with McCarthy, Ayeti, Barkas. I'd rather sort of look into the loan option, go back to the Asian market, look at the Man City youngsters. I believe we've been linked with 2. I'm saying it's too late for the Champions League if we sign them in January. Hopefully it won't be. Hopefully we can finish third anyway. But then if you sign them in January, they're ready for the next Champions League, and you've got to hope that we will be playing automatic group stage football next season, because you've got the 8 games, and if you finish between 9th and 24th, you've got another 2 games added onto that. So there's a lot more money involved next year. I still think we're going to win the league, as long as there isn't a mad fire sale in the next couple of weeks. But I think as long as we're bringing in quality, I don't think there's a bad time to bring them in. If you can't get them in, look to maybe get a loan in, a bit like Tierney, a bit like Jota and Carter Vickers. But otherwise, I don't want this to be replacing Deadwood with more Deadwood.
Well, the loan thing, I don't think we were using it properly the last time Brennan was here, because there was no real light at the end of the tunnel. It was a short-term fix, if you like. We then started to bring in loan players. And when you've got a success like Carter Vickers and Jota, you think we're doing it right. There's been a few others, the Gents and Abelgard, where it's not really worked out. But under the circumstances, if Celtic's next signing, John, was a loan, I think there would be a meltdown. And I can absolutely see the merits in bringing one in. But people would be saying, we're standing still. This shows a lack of ambition. I thought we were going for European progression.
I couldn't care less. If he's a loan with an option to buy, then I would happily sign every player with a loan with an option to buy. And you're talking about the ones that didn't work out, Abelgard and Jens. Well, they did work out. They came in, they weren't good enough, and they were out the door. And no harm done. So they worked out from that point of view. We weren't left with them sitting in contracts. As we have at the moment, a whole load of guys whose contracts we have to shuffle about. Loan to buy for us is almost the ideal option. You get a guy who's maybe a bit more expensive than you would normally pay, want to pay. You agree a settled fee. You get to see him for a year. You try before you buy. What's the matter with that? And then you know exactly what you're getting. Did anyone have any doubt that 6 million on Jota and 6 million on Carter Vickers wasn't sensational business? But if they come in straight off the bat, they could have been, what happened if they flopped? What happened if he get his knee done in the first 6 months? I would take loan to buy all day, every day. So, I mean, I don't understand why people would be upset about it, but you have to have an option to buy. A straight loan is of no interest to us, because it doesn't suit the model at all. But, I mean, it does enable us to get a slightly better standard of player as well, potentially. So no, I'm all for it, and I, at the moment, I couldn't care less if they come in wearing tutus. Never mind what contract they're on. I mean, I just want them in the door. I want starters in the door.
Might be better than that home strip, mate. By the way, I'm going to throw this one at you, John. With all that said, if we get a reveal video on the socials Tuesday next week, and it's Kieran Tierney wearing a number 3 jersey, and it's a short-term loan deal, do we take it all back?
Yeah.
There are exceptions to the rule. There are one or two exceptions.
There are definitely exceptions. Although, I mean, KT coming back with Brendan Rodgers, there'll be guys walking around trying to subsume so much rage their heads are near popping off. It's like we go from just the if they come back and people will be calling it an infestation. There'll be guys absolutely raging at that. But personally, I don't care. I want a better team. I don't care about a guy that maybe hurt your feelings or whatever it is. Suck up, get over it. We're adults. Come on, I want this team to do well in Europe, and frankly, as long as it's not a Di Canio or someone like that, then I'm quite happy, to have anyone on board. I don't think hurt feelings is an appropriate reason to, say we don't want a clearly high quality player. And Tierney is one, for instance, who you might really only want alone because he's been injury prone. Mm-hmm. So if we absolutely broke the bank for someone like that, and then he did himself, in short order, that would be an absolute catastrophe for us, which is why we can't buy players at that sort of level, even if we have the money in the bank, because a one-off like that, something happens to them, you're toast, your whole season's, burning down round about you because you made all these plans based on one guy. So, look, of course there are exceptions, but, have a good laugh about it, but let's just get the starters in.
No, I totally agree with that. And by the way, thanks everybody for getting involved. 1,000 strong on this Wednesday afternoon bulletin. It's always an absolute pleasure to have a wee chat about Celtic with Patrick McGilp and John Hughes. And of course, everybody in the comments field, if you want to make a comment, all you need to do is subscribe to the channel. We're heading towards 23,000 on the YouTube, which is quite astonishing, really. So thank you everybody for your support. Our latest initiative, a couple of shout outs I must mention. First and foremost, Paddy Lavery, the man is an absolute legend. He sent us a jersey. It's a Crumlin Star jersey, and tomorrow I'm going to have it on a mannequin behind me so that you can all see it in all its beauty. And also, Daniel Martin sent us a Craig Gordon jersey, right? And that is part of the Sell the Jerseys initiative that we have set up to raise funds for wee Jamie Tierney. More about Jamie's condition is in the link underneath this particular video. We're just basically asking Celtic fans to give me your old jerseys, and we can collect them, you can send them, we can meet up at an event or up at Celtic Park on a Monday morning, wherever, and we'll get your jerseys, get them signed up from the legends, get them framed up, auction and raffle them, make some much needed funds and donate it to Jamie's fundraiser. But the Craig Gordon one, incredible. I mean, what Daniel was at pains to stress to me was he can't authenticate that it's a match-worn jersey. And this is the thing with these jerseys. They're so similar, if not identical, to replicas these days. But for me, looking at it, name, number, Celtic Foundation insignia, Champions League insignia, it looks like the real deal. There's even a wee bit of muck on the front of it. So we're going to get Craig Gordon to sign it for us, and we will make a few quid from that one and all the others. Thanks, everybody, for getting involved. It really is incredible, especially, Patrick, when you think about how valuable old jerseys have become in the modern day, and we're getting them, by the way, by the bucket load in the studio so we can make some money for good causes. It just shows you, the measure of the Celtic fan base, doesn't it?
It does. Excuse me, it does. They are obviously hard to come by, but it shows, the sort of Celtic community and the Acsom community coming together for good causes, and it is obviously for a good cause. We've obviously... Sorry, my voice is going a bit. No, it is for a brilliant cause, and it's brilliant to see viewers and Celtic fans help out and helping each other. Because obviously, we're all brought together by football, but it's all about health and making your way through life and I'm rambling a bit here, but it is brilliant to see what charity and what community can bring, because obviously, Jamie Tierney, you're trying to raise an extraordinary amount of money, and obviously anything we can do to help that is obviously wonderful.
No, it is. And I know I'm asking a lot because obviously there are things that people often place a lot of kind of focus and onus on, their old Celtic jerseys, great memories, but people are stepping up to the plate, John. And it's just brilliant to be able to put the message out there, really, pull it all together, make some much needed cash for the wee guy, and hopefully make him and his family's life a wee bit easier.
Well, there are a lot of very nice and outstanding individuals that follow this club who put a lot of time and effort into charity and community, and that's what makes it special. So, every club has its absolute rockets in its support. There is no, just the law of averages, makes that a fact. But what we have is the very large preponderance of our fans are community-minded, are charity-minded, understand what the club was about, why it was founded, and are willing to put time and effort. And I mean, a couple of things did last year. What was that thing they did? Go to the Arctic or whatever, when they were pulling sleds around the Arctic, and there was guys cycling all over the show, ridiculous distances, and all of this time and effort and out of your life to try and better someone else's life. So it's a beautiful thing to see. And one of the reasons why I think we all love this club.
Without a doubt, John. You're right. They're going on Arctic treks. I just seen this morning that Simon Donnelly's away to the Sahara. I mean, to raise funds for the needy. It's superb. David Boyle, you're in on the YouTube. I hope we get another centre-back in for Starfelt. We've actually spoken about a couple of centre-halves. Obviously, the one that you've already mentioned there, Patrick, Gustav Lagerbielk. But Volendam's Xavier Muyamba, his name's come up a few times over the last few weeks, and it's not going away. These two players, they're in that kind of age bracket whereby they might not get a game ahead of Carter Vickers or Novroski at this stage, but you're looking at they two. I'm not even going to say projects because they've played a lot of games, between the two of them. And in terms of Lagerbielk, he's a Swedish internationalist, So you're looking at they two guys, you're thinking, right, so that gives us the four. But as John says, we're top heavy in that position. And then you've got to start looking at what does it mean for Stephen Welsh and Kobayashi and Lawal even, if these other players were to come in. Does it spell the end of their Celtic careers? Because we really do need to try and trim the squad as well, don't we?
Yeah, definitely. That might be another area where we look to utilise another couple of loans, because again, it's hard to talk about this. Guys like Stephen Welsh, Greg Taylor, without talking about the 8 Scottish player quota that we need for Europe. I mean, it can't be ignored, but it is it's like a wee add-on when you're having these conversations, because by all accounts, I mean, I've not heard much about the Muyamba guy. I only heard about him for the first time last night, but the Lagerbielke centre half from Elfsborg looks to be a good player going by the stats. I think he's quite a good range of passing as well. Obviously, only 23, so another one that you could maybe make a couple of quid on in a few years' time. But guys like Lawal and Kobayashi, maybe not guys for right now, but also not guys you want to sell just yet. Maybe utilise a loan system, because as you say, you've got 7 there now. One's going to leave, and we're maybe looking at 1 or 2 coming in. So that's a hell of a lot of players. I think with Welsh, I suppose if you bring Tierney in, you can move a Scottish player on, but then you're looking at guys like Welsh and Bain and Mikey Johnston and James Forrest, guys who aren't really contributing to the squad, but we need to keep them around. Ralston's definitely second choice right back, but if AJ's fit for the full season, AJ probably plays every single game. So it's something that we're going to have to look at very closely over the next few years, because obviously we want to win the Champions League group stage every year. I think if we keep winning the league, and I think we'll keep winning the league, we will be there. And you want to reinvest that money and try and build a better team. But if it's going to get to a stage where we're going to have 18 or 17 or 18 first team players and then 8 Scottish guys that don't really get a game, but we have to include them in the squad. So it's a bit of a conundrum, but I think that Lagerbiello, I think he'll be quite a good signing if we get him in. I think we're going to get him relatively cheap as well, only 2 or 3 million. I think he's probably going to go for a lot more than that in a
Funny
few
you're
years'
saying
time.
that, Patrick.
So,
By the way, just you're actually bang on. I don't know if you realised you were bang on there, because the maximum number of players that we used out of that squad of 25 any point during European campaign was 17. So
good guess.
you're absolutely very good guess. You're absolutely bang on the money. So there's basically 8 guys that are just taking up bench space, and it could well be exactly pan out as you are saying. And I'll tell you an interesting thing about Lagerbiello, and I'll not mention the other boy, although he's a big name as well, very much as Jan Vennegoor of Hesselink was a big name, I think. But he's a big name, the boy Lagerbiello, also. But he is, in fact, I looked him up. I couldn't really see much. His stats didn't really tell me anything. I kept looking, looked at his YouTube, and actually looked pretty good. It looked like Mirovski, basically. He looked really decent, challenging, a really decent distribution, very good long ball distribution. And that's the other thing we need to come back to there, because it turns out then, I was listening to a Swedish journalist saying that the reason I think they couldn't see too many stats from him is because last year he was on loan, and he was the best player in that team by all accounts. This season he's come back. He's playing for the guys who are top of the league at the moment, and apparently he's the best defender there. And in terms of the direct ball, we are currently playing, and at the weekend they played some like 20 or 30 more direct balls than we would do in a normal game under Ange. So clearly, Brendan wants people who can get it up the park to the likes of Maeda without going through the midfield and do it accurately. And the other thing is, I think we're overpaying for him. I think that's how much we want him. I think he's actually valued about $1 million and a half. We've offered there 3 million, and I think they were sort of taken aback by that. So we've gone in heavy here. And actually, when you look at his stats and when you look at the timing of events about Starfelt going out, it is possible that this guy is seen to be the Starfelt replacement, and Narovki was supposed to be the backup.
Interesting. That is, and by the way, when it comes to the fees, John, I can understand where people are coming from when we talk about the types of fee that we're paying, because you look at the fee, the age of a player, and then you come to a conclusion as to the type of player. Where do they fit in the squad? So there's a point coming in from Alf, spending half the Starfelt money on his replacement. Yes, you are. But, if you think also about the fact that Jota, we're talking about a replacement for Jota, I don't think we're going to get one. And what I mean by that is I think he's already in the building. I think the replacement for Jota is Abada. And as John said, we were probably already making plans for Abada's departure by bringing in a couple, Yang and Tilio. Tilio, who I'm excited to see. I've not seen any of them in a Celtic jersey like everybody else. I'm really looking forward to seeing him because Jared speaks very highly of him. Yang, I think, has shown all that kind of promise in the moments that he's had an opportunity since he came. But they clearly were backups. And Jota then leaves, and you think to yourself, well, Abada, somehow Brendan Rodgers has convinced him that his future, his immediate future lies with Celtic. He's the replacement. So I'm not expecting us to go out and break the bank for a winger to replace Jota, Patrick, because Abada, I think he's given us enough. He's a different type of player. But I just think that if we get the consistency out of him this season, then it won't be a case of Jota who, because everybody's going to miss Jota. I don't think we need to try and replace him. We've got him in the building already.
Yeah, in terms of numbers, he can definitely provide just as much, if not more. It's just about, sort of replacing Abada's numbers, if you want to say that. And then if Maeda's tasked with doing that, who replaces Maeda's numbers, if that makes any sense. And you're probably looking at guys like Tilio, and as you go further down the pecking order, because you obviously, a successful team, and we have been a successful team the last 2 seasons, you get loads of different guys contributing goals. Obviously, Kyogo had his 34 goals last season, but you've got midfielders and wingers scoring 10, 15 as well, and it's a sign of a successful team. And I think we will be a successful team this year. I think we are going to win the league. I'm sure Kyogo, Abada, Maeda will all score those goals. It's just about, it's almost an impossible task to sort of measure where we are with compared to last year and compared to where we're going to be this year in Europe. And we've seen in pre-season how that front three can operate. I mean, all three of them are absolutely rapid. A lot of the, they all have their off days, but they're all fairly clinical as well. And I think in the Champions League, it's all about taking the chances when they come, because I think we're, as much as we might have underperformed a bit last season, I thought we were quite unlucky, especially in the Shakhtar games. You could even say in two of the Leipzig games, I don't know if we'd have beat Leipzig, but I think if we take more of our chances, we could have done a lot better last season. And hopefully that's something that the team can work on this season. And the league, I think I don't want to be overconfident here, but I think we're more than good enough to win the league. I think, and I think with the improvements we're going to make in defence, by the sounds of things, we've signed Narovski. We might sign another two centre halves. Defensively, I don't think we're going to have many challenges, many upsets. So it's. I think we've still got a bit to go in Europe. Obviously, it's the luck of the draw as well. We could get Real Madrid, Bayern Munich, and Newcastle, and bye third place, in my opinion. But I think we just need to try and do as well as I think goalkeeper number one priority, no doubt about it. We obviously brought up a comment there saying we're signing a Starfelt replacement for half the money that we got from Starfelt, but if you look at it a different way, we've already spent 4.4 on Narovski, and you've only got 600 left from the Starfelt money. You're also not going to spend 25 million replacing Jota. So, no, I think it's been an okay window so far. I think there's certainly still 2 or 3 positions to go, and as we've talked about, you need to move 5 or 6 guys on. But confident for the domestic season ahead, and Champions League will sort of bring what it brings.
This again, John, we can kind of pinpoint this. There was a feeling, I think, a confidence that we were all under this kind of spell under Ange Postecoglou. And I remember Callum McGregor talking about the fact he wanted Real Madrid. Remember that? He wanted to draw Real Madrid. And you're sitting thinking to yourself, right, do you actually want to qualify? Because as well as we did against them for 65 minutes at Celtic Park, you know what the outcome is if you draw Real Madrid. And I just think there's a more pragmatic approach to Brendan Rodgers, looking even at that small example of it, John, the way that Ange had kind of not brainwashed the team, but the way that his state of mind kind of engulfed not just the players, but also the support. We're all up for it. All right, Real Madrid, let's go for it. Whereas I'm looking at it now and I'm thinking, I want to qualify. Right, so when I'm looking at the group, I'm not just thinking box office. I'm just thinking the best possible draw is the one that we can negotiate.
Well, I don't know if everyone was behind it. I was losing my mind, if you might remember, over those 2 Shakhtar games, because he would not mark Mudryk. He would not do anything to try and stop Mudryk. We were playing our game, and that was it. And we paid for that in both games. And it was as clear as crystal to anyone who had ever watched them. They were as close to a one-man team as I've ever seen. If you shut down Mudryk, we would have shut them down, and he just refused to do it. So I think Brendan Rodgers is far more practical than that, and if he was presented with that same conundrum, I think he would do something about it. In terms of the draw, we were very fortunate last year. We had pretty much the best draw I think I've ever remembered us getting. So can we get that 2 years in a row? I'd be very doubtful. So, it could be a big challenge, but that's why it's a proper big challenge. It's a massive challenge. We need to get that third place. We need to get into the Europa, and then in the following year, I think there is no drop down, is there? You just keep on. So this is the last year there's a drop down, but we need to get into the Europa. We need to challenge in that league, and I think we could be great in there and have a great run that everyone would enjoy. Even getting out of the group, for instance, in the Champions League would be an unbelievable achievement, but we wouldn't get any further. Let's just be real about it. We're not going to get any further. So we drop into the Europa, we get that third place, and we have a great run, and that's really all we're looking for. I can just say, we've sort of been talking about the concerns that we have. Just the one thing I really enjoyed at the weekend, and I've enjoyed since the start, is Kyogo's some player dropping into that false nine. I think we might have found our own wee Messi. And some of the balls he was playing round the corner, and some of the through balls dropping deep was just beautiful stuff. Beautiful
Great
stuff.
to watch.
And I absolutely loved it.
Aye. See the thing with that, John, you think you've got the player. You think you've seen what Kyogo offers last season, right? What was it, 54 goals in 2 seasons? And you think, a massive part of that's about the goals, but what he showed so far is elements to his game that you think, wow, and it's not so much Brendan Rodgers taking the player to another level. It's just tapping into aspects of the player's game that I don't think we were focusing on before under Ange. And again, I'm not sitting here saying, oh, Ange is a rubbish gaffer. Absolutely not. What Ange Postecoglou did was phenomenal in the space of time that he did it. But I do think that there are elements to Brendan Rodgers' coaching and managerial ability, Patrick, that's going to bring things out of particular players. Now, when the conversation around we're weaker than we were last season, we spoke about it a couple of weeks ago, the one point I did continually go over was the fact that, yeah, but he might make Matt O'Reilly and he might make Abada better players. What we've seen is he might be able to tap into David Turnbull's psyche, he might be able to tap into things that Kyogo wasn't doing before. And that might happen throughout the entire squad. It might also not work for the guys, like Greg Taylor, for example. We've spoken about him. It might not work for him. But, that's one thing that I think Kyogo and his performance that John's speaking about really brings to the fore, is the fact that Brendan Rodgers is going to see things in these players that we've not seen already.
Yeah, and I noticed the same thing. I think it was the Wolves friendly, Kyogo's goal. Just the way, under Ange, I didn't think he moved with the ball a lot. I always thought obviously his movement off the ball is brilliant. His ability to score inside the 18-yard box is brilliant. But he was moving a lot better with the ball. He looked a lot better on the ball. And I think that could be a wonderful asset for us to have, those three linking up together up front. Another bit of business that I'd like to see this transfer window actually would be to extend Turnbull's contract, because I think I'm right in saying he's only got 12 months left, and he's obviously been a revelation the last couple of weeks. If he continues to be so, I think that's an easy decision, because with a year left, it might be 2 years, but I'm pretty sure it's only a year. You either need to extend that or get money from, and I wouldn't like to see him sold after the impact he's had in the squad the last couple of games. But no, you're right. I mean, obviously Turnbull's one that's came on, Kyogo another one, O'Reilly I think could be another one that comes on leaps and bounds under Brendan. And you think maybe the squad's a bit weaker than what it was maybe in May or June, but we're arguably playing better. I mean, I thought we were a bit sluggish at times towards the last 2-3 months of last season. I honestly thought we were. We're struggling to get through games, and we obviously sort of fall off a cliff in the last 4 or 5 games of the league last year. But I think Brendan's one. He's obviously a lot more involved with the team. Actually talks to the players, unlike Ange. And he's a personable guy. He's a great one-to-one manager. So I'm hoping we can improve a few players over the next year or two.
Well, that's an interesting point, because people have just glossed over that. It's bizarre that now it turns out that Ange, who was portrayed, we never stopped, that he was always on the pitch, he was always doing the training. Now it turns out that we never stopped failing to turn up at training was a bit of Ange's motto. So he was like Martin O'Neill levels of aloof. He was basically only turning up the day before training, which was not the way it was presented. So, everyone's just glossed over that. I just thought it was absolutely bizarre. But the couple of things you're saying there, Turnbull and O'Reilly both look better because of Kyogo dropping deep, and that's where their chances came from. Was Kyogo's dropping deep, making things happen. They're running past the striker, and both of them can finish, and they look great doing it as well. I mean, O'Reilly's goal was an absolute peach. So they look fantastic. But realistically, when Brendan first came in, the talk was he was looking for 2 midfielders, very much of the sort of big, athletic, dynamic, the kind of guys who we normally can't afford. And in my view, if we're going to progress again, and no harm to these guys, we do still need those 2. Whether it's this window, I don't know. I'll be happy if we just plug some holes at this point. But if we're going to progress, we need a different quality of player. I don't think either Turnbull or Hatate are potentially the answer in Europe. I think Callum again. We maybe need someone a wee bit more dynamic in there and bigger and more athletic. Now, this is just a wish list, to be fair, but we have enough money to make something happen. But I just don't know. Right now we have enough money, but I don't think we've got enough time. So we'll just have to see.
This is the thing. It is the time aspect that's my biggest concern. I like the fact that Brendan's come in. He's taken his time to assess the squad, but there isn't that luxury of time, unfortunately. Scottish Jason, I thought Ange was in the past. He is, but we've got a fantastic history, an unbroken history, Scottish Jason, and we do talk about it from time to time. And the one example I was going to give, talk about naivety. We're talking about the naivety of approaching particular games in Europe and all that. There was a famous tie, which was in the semi-final of the European Cup Winners' Cup 1964. And I remember speaking to a few ex-Celts about this. Your late father was involved in this game, John, and this was the MTK Budapest scenario where we absolutely hammered them 3-0 at Celtic Park. We beat them 3-0 at Celtic Park, and bearing in mind this is a semi-final of a European competition, and this is 3 years before Lisbon, and we go over to Budapest, and the team talk, believe it or not, was given by the chairman. Bob Kelly gave the team talk, not Jimmy McGrory. Bob Kelly gave the team talk, and he tell the Celtic players, I want you to show these guys entertaining football, because we were in a foreign land. We're in Budapest. We want to show them how we can play football. We went out, and what was the score? We got pumped 4-0, right? So it's just about having a pragmatism about you. And then Jockstein, who was famed for his, fast-flowing, entertaining style of football, you fast forward 3 years later, John, European Cup semi-final, we beat Dukla Prague 3-1 at home. We defend the return leg away from home. We defend like we've never defended before, and we get a 0-0. And we did it, and we got through to the final, obviously, of the European Cup. So I think that the pragmatism is something I'm looking really forward to seeing from Brendan Rodgers.
Yeah, well, I mean, we said before, as soon as Brendan came in, we said we hope to see a less swashbuckling style, just with no thought of, consequences to that. Because, let's be honest, the style of we score, we concede 3, but we'll score 4. That's not realistic, a level that we're going to play at. If we play that way, we are going to get pumped for the most part by some of these teams who are absolutely, superb. And so we just can't afford to be as cavalier as that. Mm-hmm. So we might not like it, but, we need to have a more defensive setup and a more counter-attacking setup. And we have guys who are superb on the counter-attack. Yeah. If you take, in fact, so we have guys who can really only play on the counter-attack. If you look at the likes of Maeda, he's terrible when he's back to goal. He's absolutely superb running forward. You know what I mean? So we have a front three who thrive on a counter-attacking game, but we need to give them a chance to play that. We need to not concede 3 goals in the first 15 minutes, to make sure the whole thing is null and void. So, I'm hoping that Brendan will be a lot more practical, but I'm also hoping he'll have a lot more quality in the team to be practical with.
Yes, yeah, without a doubt. And we can't really judge the transfer window until it closes. So obviously we will be doing that once that time comes, and I'm pretty sure there'll be a few more bodies in the door by that stage. By the way, it's been a very quick hour. I know I say that quite a lot, but it is true. There's a lot to cover. And I've got to say that on a Wednesday afternoon, it's a real joy to be joined by Patrick McGilp and John Hughes, and also with the 1,000 strong who stuck it out for the whole hour and got involved in the chat. I know that I don't always get the opportunity to bring everybody's comments up, but I am going to bring up yours, Paddy, because you might have missed your shout out earlier. Thank you very much for the jersey. It's much appreciated. It will be joining me on a mannequin this time tomorrow, because I know that JP loves his football jerseys. So I'll be challenging him to see if he can guess what the jersey is. and let's just hope he's not listened to the beginning of this show. If you want to get involved in the initiative of Sell the Jerseys, you can get in touch with us. We're easy to get a hold of on the DMs, on the social media, pauljohndykes@gmail.com, and we'll get the jerseys signed up, framed up, and then sold off for a very, very good cause. All that's left for me to say is, Patrick and John Hughes, thank you for joining me on A Celtic State of Mind.